This week on the Evolve to Perform podcast, we had the honor and pleasure of sitting down with Chelsea Horenstein, the owner of Lines of Life Acupuncture, where she has offices in the city, Forest Hills, and right here on Long Island.
In this episode, we touched on Chelsea's backstory on how it led her to her passion for acupuncture.
We also discussed what acupuncture is and what it isn't. We talked about how it's not just her sticking you with needles, and we even talked about the different modalities she uses that are not just needles. So if you have a fear of needles, there's something that you will also get out of this podcast.
I think very quickly on this episode, you'll start to understand that Chelsea has a very gentle touch, a very gentle approach to make someone feel super comfortable when you're with her.
So if you were curious about what acupuncture is, or if you've been a lover of acupuncture and you just want to hear her take, stay tuned.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Evolve to Perform podcast. I'm Kingsley.
I'm Jordan.
And today we are so privileged to have Chelsea Horenstein here of Lines of Life Acupuncture with us. So Chelsea, welcome.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
We are so happy to have you here. We're excited to learn about you. So, we're just going to jump right into it, okay? No pressure, just really easy conversation. We like to just find out with a lot of our guests here, because you are a business owner, you're a passionate clinician and practitioner. We want to know your backstory just a little bit, and you can take us all the way back, to
birth.
Maybe birth, or if this happens to be either your first career or something else, and all these other paths that it has led you to where you are.
So it is definitely not my first career, as I think for many, even within the healthcare landscape. The roots of it, I would say, or the inspiration traces way back to childhood. I, for undergraduate school, went to film school and practiced or worked in film for 10 years in production management, coordination mainly, some creative end in terms of associate producing and other editing work. And then probably a bit into it, realized that it wasn't very conducive to any kind of healthy living at all. Definitely, and still it's shifted some, but definitely a boys' club, not really family friendly. At that time I didn't have kids, but it was, the writing was kind of on the wall that this was to be a long-term thing. It just might not match with some of the things that I wanted for my own health overall. So I started thinking about going back to school. And as anybody who has considered second careers, it's definitely a path in that where it takes some years and some really just mulling over it. So I considered I was like, well, what do I really love? And I really loved animals for many years. So I'm like, I'm going to go back to veterinary school. But I want to do it in a holistic manner. And from the research into it, I realized that in order to be a holistic veterinarian, you need to first be a veterinarian and then tack on the holistic side of it. Veterinary school is obviously, as it should be, a very long-term and time investment.
Totally.
So I decided to go the holistic route first, go back to school within Eastern medicine and study acupuncture, Chinese medicine. And so I studied and got my master's degree, which I'm not sure how familiar people are. I mean, as any master's program, there's some link to it too, but this one is a 4-year program. So you do need the time where you're learning both the biomedical side, the Eastern medical side, the philosophy. There's obviously some language involved. There's the various modalities involved, and there's the internship and treatment side. So you need that time there for that. I would say the inspiration, though, goes so far back and definitely bleeds into my current work I was really fortunate to have a mom and an aunt who were very holistic minded and love home remedies and just a lot of how do you connect with the earth and connect with the seasons, and just how do we best flow with all of that. So, and there's so much that echoes within the study of the medicine and then the practice of the medicine with that. So once I was in it, it felt like, oh, this feels right. This is really it feels like the right choice for me. And I feel very gifted, I guess, in many ways to be practicing what I am because
Yeah, I'm going to interrupt you quickly.
yeah.
I will say that yes, you are. Just like personally, like just from having like a treatment session, treatment sessions with you,
kind.
I can feel that. So I'm just going to vouch for that. So sorry.
You're really kind. Thank you. Yeah, and we can dive some more into this, but so much is that relationship that when you're working with a patient and how you're, there's so much of the medicine that's not just energetic, and we can talk some more about that, but we also can't deny that it is an energetic medicine. And so the interaction with the patients is definitely a big part of how their energy or chi is moving and how mine is working. And it is really a gift in many ways to be able to have a tool that you can, it's a medicine that you can help people, but that you can also have that kind of connection and relationship with. And I get to treat all my old production friends that are the poor things, like carrying cameras and working terribly long hours. They're stressed out and body aches and pains, and so it's that kind of full circle is really nice as well. So
Absolutely.
Here I am.
And how did you come up with Lines of Life as the name of your business?
Gosh, I feel like I haven't thought about that for so many years. So I've been in practice for now over 12 years.
Wow.
So the channels, the acupuncture channels, or there's lots of different names. So sometimes I refer to them as meridians, sometimes MAI, which just refers to that. They're also considered waterways within the body. So and when you're studying too, you look at these models and there's truly these lines that are flowing, from the very tips and all the way down, all the way up, and ways around the body. So that part seemed like a natural fit to make a reference to that. But what I've also found, and which is embedded in the philosophy as well, the idea of the microcosm and the macrocosm. So if you, I remember when I was first making my website and I was choosing some initial photographs, there was this one that I had obviously from very up high, and these pathways of water and lush greenness of just, of the land, really. And the idea is this larger, what you're seeing within the earth is echoed within us. So it felt very fitting to have that within the name, that, we are a piece of that, and we are, echoed in that.
I love that.
But thanks for asking. I really haven't thought about it. So many years,
So I feel like when people hear acupuncture, immediately they think needles. And full disclosure for our listeners, both me and Kingsley have had sessions with Chelsea. And going into it, for me, I was so nervous because I was like, oh my gosh, she's going to stick me with a bunch of needles. And I don't really have a phobia of needles, but it just doesn't sound fun. Just get stuck with 100%. A bunch of needles.
It does not.
So when I actually had my session with you, I was like, whoa, this is so different than what I thought it would be. And I feel very passionate to get that out there, because I feel like if more people knew what it was, they would be more likely to try it. So I know it's so many things, but could you maybe take us through a session of what people might expect and how it might not just be sticking us with needles?
Definitely. So many different paths for that. I guess in terms of where to start, so with the initial sessions, you first do an intake. So a lot of it within any work. So if there's any kind of invasiveness, and let's be candid, there is a level of vulnerability and minor invasiveness in the fact that, yes, there's small little objects that are placed within the body. So whenever you're doing something like that, establishing trust is a really big part of that. So people really have the chance, as the session unfolds, to talk about, number one, their health history, which is very important. currently where they are with things. If they're coming to you with a certain ailment, you definitely want to hear everything about that ailment. Even sometimes things that they don't think of. So what time of day is this really occurring more? Or, you know, if there's a type of pain, like let's talk in detail, like the type of, you know, sensation that you're having. Or even if we're talking about all the ins and outs of your bowel movement, you know, it's like, well, are you, you know, tired after that kind of thing? Like things that we don't always think of. So that's part of the initial work where there's that talking period. Obviously, we don't force anything. So if there's something somebody doesn't want to talk about, that is completely fine. We put it on pause and we move on with other things. Pulse and tongue is a big part of our diagnostics there. And I had a wonderful mentor for many years that she would talk about pulse taking as the initial part of the treatment. So we normally think of acupuncture as, you know, you lie down on the massage table and you get poked with needles. But the pulse taking is actually a really important part of the process, partly for my diagnostics to be able to feel what's going on there. And we can talk in some more detail if we want about what I'm feeling for. And then also looking at the tongue. So that in itself, and what her phrasing was always that, you know, when you're feeling the pulses, there's a level of qigong, which is happening, the pulses. So what that's making a reference to is the functioning of the nervous system, and how when we talk about fight or flight, or the, you know, rest and digest, so the sympathetic, you know,
the
as well.
Sympathetic, yeah.
And so that at first just very light touch, and that contact, that initial contact actually is a lot. Again, that's that qi interaction, and it's also the nervous system at play. So that's the first part of the treatment overall. Once we have that diagnostic information, and if they at that time, sometimes that even brings out more information. Another little thing that I always loved that mentor said, she was like, people will share, you know, their life narratives with you. And many times, you know, and we all have this, where we fall into a certain narrative, and sometimes we're very attached to it. Sometimes it's very triggering for us. Sometimes it's, you know, we just haven't dealt with all aspects of it. Whatever that narrative may be, she would always say, and I do find a lot of truth in this, she's like, the pulses won't lie to you. She was like, they may need to speak their truth in a certain way, but the pulses will always speak their truth. And that's diagnostically very helpful, but it also is very humbling as a practitioner too, to just be witness to, you know, to such an unfolding in that way, where you kind of feel the person in a way.
So you can like call their bluff.
In a sense, I mean, I kind of want to like do a pop culture reference, but in terms of like Avatar, you know, with the whole like I see you kind of thing. So it's sort of, it's not necessarily saying, you didn't tell me that, like gotcha kind of thing,
right? But
much more of like, oh, you are experiencing this right now, and you know, I see it, and I you know, in a sense, I feel for you, and I'm here to like support you through it.
Yeah.
So that actually is, a big part. And not to say, in my mind, there's times where it's like, okay, they said this, and I'm feeling this, and let's see how we can kind of put this together. It is always a practice, and maybe within, you know, the work here too, to not come from a place of judgment. Also, you want to make diagnostic choices and information that can best serve the patient or the client. But I don't also want to judge them for choices, or even make a call that I don't yet have all the information on. So there is definitely a process that's unfolding for me as well with that. So once we establish that, then typically I explain to them like how they're going to lie on the table. We do either usually starting face up or face down treatments, where they're set up in a face cradle, so get them comfortable. There are sideline treatments too. There are specific, uses for that. So sometimes that is indicated. Typically, if it's a patient's first time, we would start either face up or face down, depending on where their comfort level is. I typically try to talk it through with them. Usually people are used to massages or used to other work that they've been face down, so they're usually fine either way. There is a level of undressing, and that does happen because of certain points that we need to get to. Obviously, again, there's a lot of respect there and comfortability. We talk through that as well. There's always draping. Typically, they're under a top sheet, so there's coverage everywhere, but it's someone's comfortability level too. So we navigate that as well. As we highlighted before, there could be a vulnerable space in general, and often they've just, have shared a lot of, just candidly, a lot of very vulnerable things. So we want to be respectful of that. When the acupuncture session is beginning, so just to state, I'm not sure how familiar people are with different types of needles and such, because that's what you were even saying before. I was just like, oh my gosh, and they poked with a needle. Which, and so many of us were so familiar with the hypodermic needles that we get in the doctor's office, or various injections, vaccines, and other needs for that. These are filiform needles, so a lot of them are no bigger than the shaft of your hair. Sometimes you can hold up one in the air, you hold the handle, and you can't even see the needle point because it's so fine.
Right.
So often a lot of these needles are very, either the length is pretty short relative of how we're working, or they're very, very fine. So there is that aspect that does make it a little bit better in terms of the poking side of things. That the needles themselves are very bendy. They have been really honed in terms of how they're made, in terms of a certain smoothness and just how they glide and work. It is a very interesting thing to, I don't really have a scientific explanation for this, but it is, I remember from very early on being taught this, and in practice, I feel it and see it all the time, where you'll go to insert a needle, and in some ways it sort of finds a space or finds a way between some of the tissues or some of the anatomical structures. Obviously, that's part of your training, where you obviously learn the acupuncture points, but you learn how to safely needle. There's always the fear, you're working with internal organs and such. None of the needles you're working with are typically long enough to injure, but you do want to be very safety-minded and careful. But that's why you're trained in safe needle technique for that. But even so, there's when you're holding and working with the needle, you can feel the structures below, and you get a sense of where the needle is spatially in terms of the body. And I think that also, in terms of just how it feels with sensation, helps for the patient too, because, and I want to be candid, there are points that have strong sensations, and there are points that, for the millisecond or something with the first, insertion in, can have a little oof, feeling. Overall, and this is something within the treatment space that I explain, where there's different things you may feel, but if there's any lasting pain, there's always so many ways to go about treatment. We don't need to have somebody lay there in pain or lay there uncomfortable. There's usually a warmth sometimes that can happen. There's a distension feeling. There's just a flow feeling, a connection. Those are all totally normal sensations. If anything is burning or too uncomfortable, again, there's ways to, you typically take the needle out, and there's ways to reassess and see. But that also doesn't happen so often. Essentially, once the needles are in, and there is a lot to say about how the points are chosen and how the points are needled in terms of order and technique, but to just go through the session itself, typically the needles are left for roughly a half an hour within the patient. It's so funny that when we were talking about like the podcast number and you were like, oh, maybe it's 28 or 29. 28 is a really big number within Chinese medicine.
Do tell.
In terms of the circulation of qi through the body, so that number of like how long do we leave the needles in for, like roughly a half an hour. The circulation of qi through the body, when we're making reference to that, there's various organ systems that the qi will circulate through. There's what's called the qi circadian rhythm and a qi organ clock. So to just step out of that, answering the other parts, let's say you come to me and you're saying, oh, I'm waking up, at 3 a.m. I'm waking up at 5 a.m. and this is happening. One of my internal, thoughts is like, oh, okay, what organ system is being affected at that time of the day when the qi is circulating through? Because typically, we have a little stagnation point. So it's kind of hitting against the wall. The person is waking up into alertness. And there's something very telling about that particular system that it's affecting. Sometimes people will have an early morning, bowel movement, like even earlier than like before they wake up. So we look at what time is because the qi is circulating through the body, through organ systems at different times. So when you're doing an acupuncture treatment, again at home, microcosm deal, where within the treatment, it's going through a circulatory pattern. So classically, that is said that it takes 28 minutes for the qi to circle
There you go.
the body. So that's where the rough number of the half an hour roughly that time comes. Typically you're being like, okay, it's 28 minutes, but depending on how it all goes. Once they have had the needle work in, I will come back into the room, and I should back up too. Maybe people know they've had it, but typically we turn down the lights, are able to relax in some level of either temperature that's comfortable, that kind of thing. Once I come back into the room after that session, I will typically follow with some other modalities. I will often feel the pulses again because the pulses are very dynamic. They will change within the course of treatment. I will sometimes even feel them when I'm needling because you can get a sense how things are flowing and how things are working. And you want to adjust. We're very dynamic creatures. So you want to be able to adjust in the moment as well with the acupuncture. Once I come back into the room and I feel the pulses, then I'll see what other modalities are needed. I'll often do some moxa, which I know you both are familiar with moxibustion. It's a bit of a misnomer to use that word. It's actually the act of moxibustion, but we call it moxa, which is an herb, mugwort, Artemisia. There's so many different types of moxa and different ways you can do it. Indirect and direct are the two ways that they're really usually referred to. I think what you both have been accustomed to, or at least with me, there's a nice type of Japanese moxa that I'll use that actually is kind of an in-between because it goes directly on the skin, but there's a little platform in between. Within definitely still practice in China, but phased out a little more here is direct moxa, where you do the rice grain moxa. So the herb itself is actually rolled into rice grain and placed on the skin. It's very effective, but it also could be a liability in terms of any like scarring, burns, or anything. There are some ways to offset it with certain ligaments and things like that, but there's so many other ways to do moxa that feels it's safe and comfortable for the patient. There's also modalities such as cupping and gua sha, which is typically used as a tool going along the skin. There's various ways to do that. I have incorporated red light laser and red light therapies in. There's gemstones, and there's essential oils. Those are some of the major ones. And then probably the final aspect of the treatment, if we don't get to talk about it within the treatment space, I typically follow up with some emails where we talk about dietary therapy. Because that is another important part of just you know, how we go through our everyday. Food is medicine in so many ways, and you know, we engage with it every day. So they can't come to treatment every day for acupuncture. So how do we, number one, continue the treatment, but also how do we best, you know, support people where they can make choices that feel right for them, that are healthy for them, but also doable. You know, we want compliance. And it's really tough if you're like, give up all gluten, give up all, you know, sugar, give up all dairy, like all in one shot. And I'm not saying that those are not like for everybody. We don't need to villainize them. It's not the way to.
Especially not Super Bowl Sunday.
There you go. We could not definitely do it right before. So, you know, that also, Chinese medicine dietary therapy looks more of like what we can bring in versus what we can take out. Are there some like, you know, when we're talking about inflammation, are there things that we know to be inflammatory? Of course.
Yeah.
And we will look to see how can we do a little less of those potentially and bring up the stuff that is medicinally good for people. You know, how can we nourish the fluids? How can we nourish the blood? How can we get qi moving? All of that. So that is definitely a very important piece as well in terms of the post part of the treatment.
Yes. And I will also say I was shocked for some reason. Like I was saying to Kingsley after my session, like, oh, like I don't have any like markings from the needles. And I think it's just because we're also used to like going to the doctor, like you were saying, with those bigger needles, and then like you're bleeding, but I had 0 marks.
That's
So what do you think? You're gonna just like drink a glass of water and start leaking?
Yeah, I thought it was gonna be like no, but I
It
thought
was so true. There's so many misconceptions. Or there's just so much, you know, and it's really up to the practitioner in many ways, or just all of us in our professions to try to, you know, share information and educate. Because you know, how do you know otherwise? You know, and it's still a relatively new-ish, you know, practice.
But is it really though?
There you go. It's
Right. You know?
history-wise,
Yeah.
and we can lead into that. Yeah, it's a medical practice that dates, you know, 2,000 to 3,000 years old. So definitely not a new practice. But for the States, for the United States, it was 1971, I think, is that like first kind of dated article where there was a journalist that went to China. It had to do with surgery, an emergency surgery, and they did acupuncture as well. Because within
was it used as anesthesia?
So there's a lot of history with acupuncture for anesthesia. In his case, it was used for, I believe they included some of it, but they also used more of a modern day, and then it was the post recovery.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But the earliest anesthesia is actually traced back to the two Chinese physicians. So Yao Wato, which is incredible. It's the Han Dynasty, I think. So that is right after BCE. So
it's like the Jedi mind trick. It's like you don't feel anything. You know, and it's like I don't know. It's just wild to me when I first learned about that too. I was like, wow, the power of the meridians and all of that stuff, and being able to you know.
No, it's really interesting. Not to go into a whole big tangent on this, but the way that the insurance system works in terms of coverage, because often you'll see for acupuncture, luckily there's a lot of pain coverage and nausea coverage, but they'll also say for anesthesia, which it is used for that, but in America it's really not used as that in terms of surgical interventions and such. But as you were referencing, 100%. I mean, there are certain points that you stimulate and someone will just look at you and you're like, whoa, like how did that just like go from, you know, a 60 like down to nothing? And it's really wild. It's really cool.
Yeah.
We wanted to take a pause just to remind you about a product that we love, Costa Rica.
Their line of olive oils, vinegars, and body products are simply unmatched.
Their olive oil is made of 100% Koroniki olives and cold pressed in southern Greece.
These olives are harvested early so that they contain a high polyphenol content, have a high cook point. This oil is the elixir of the gods, actually, Greek gods.
You can try your own Costa Rica products by clicking the link in the show notes below. Now back to the episode. Definitely.
Yeah. I just want to find out too, though. Like before you went to school, like did you have acupuncture treatment yourself?
And it's such a good point. I'm sorry that I actually left that part
No,
out because
no,
it is such a big part of the journey. When I was working in film in, that post-undergraduate time, I was seeing an acupuncturist. I actually had a really bad headache history. And I think a lot of it, stress, I think as a female, which is coming more into light, but I don't know how much, years ago it was really talked about in terms of the hormonal involvement. But it was just a big part of just my health history, and I've had them for so long that I was just like, I deal with it. I, looked into various like self-hypnosis, and I had some breathing techniques and things like that would help.
Yeah.
Definitely when I was working in production, I probably was on like an NSAID train that was just terrible, to like do a ton of like ibuprofen, and just because you're working and you just need to manage it, you need something quick. Underhydrating, I'm sure, with a crazy work schedule.
It's just like caffeine and Coke.
Yeah, well,
Well,
but yeah,
Coca-Cola. Sorry.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, not helping. And what's open too when you're working in production, when you work at like a 12, 14, 16-hour day, but it's like bars. That's what's open afterwards, so that's how people socialize in production. You need to, at least you go out to drink. So again, not a very conducive to healthy living in any way. Also dehydrated. So I was very lucky to, at that time I had a partner who through some other people connected me with this acupuncturist. She is the mentor that I referenced. She helped me through the headaches, and to this day, I mean, they have come back at times, but I have nowhere near the same level of headaches. And I probably would think about one particular incident of when I was out there in the field and, I was field producing, and with those shoots, the conditions are never good. Again, long hours, and you're just tired, overworked, that sort of thing. We were out, I think actually in Long Beach, filming a real estate show, and I remember trying to run back to one of our production vehicles, snowy ice, similar to kind of like how it is now, a really big curb, and I probably just couldn't see like where the curb was, and I just took this terrible tumble off. I sprained my ankle, and then I continued working through the production day. It was the beginning of the day, probably for another 12 hours. Oh my gosh. And luckily, the next day was an office day, so we weren't in the field. I was able to, she made the space for me. I went into my acupuncturist. So I don't want to scare people off with this kind of treatment, but there are certain treatments that are to deal with some more acute injuries. Yes. In this particular case, there's some points that we call jing wells. There are points that exist on the fingers and on the toes, and they create a very good pathway for releasing what we can say are just like pathogenic factors, but in terms of swelling and fluid buildup, and we want the body to react, to have, that's why we like swell up and have that inflammation. Yep. But sometimes it can keep going, and then to immobilize us. So when we're not like stopping and we need to get back on our feet, you need to work with that. So she was able to do a treatment which essentially got me back on my feet. She reduced the swelling. There's a bleeding technique that you can use. So it was that with some other acupuncture work. And I was able to go back out into the field, obviously wrapped the ankle, but,
Was that ankle wrapped in like an herbal paste?
That would have been smart. That would have helped the healing. I probably was like in the treatment out. I this was before my training. I had no idea. I was just like, get me in, get me out. I need to get right back out there, which I think is so many people's views. But now knowing, like, I probably, if I went back to her the next day, she'd probably be like, okay, this is our next stage. We need to do this. Have you had herbal paste before? Like
I have.
Yeah, I want to hear about some of them. They're very cool.
I mean, it's very cool. I mean, this was dating back to like when I was a kid and husky and overweight, and I had hurt an ankle or something like that. My mom's like, and something similar to you. Like my mom's like, let's go take you to someone in Chinatown. And just like, I mean, I got some treatment from acupuncture, and then it was like this.
That was your first? Wow, you were young.
I was young. It probably
Yeah.
was like, I don't know, probably 8 or 9 or something like that. And then it's like sent me home with like this like wrapper on my ankle, and it was like, and then here, let's go get you some herbs and drink this tea that like you need a ton of sugar to add into just to make it edible, right? As a young kid, it's like there's no bubblegum flavor of herbal tea, so it's just like
a different landscape for sure.
right. So it's just like sit there, and several days with the with the treatment and things like that. So that was my first exposure, and of course, at 8 years old, you're like, that's an interesting smell. And things like that,
but then I'm sure you got, I mean, you would have, obviously time does a lot, and you would have gotten better anyway in those kinds of situations. You are looking to speed up the recovery time and also create sustainable healing. You don't want to have, at this adult age now, just be like, oh, my bum ankle, because when I was 8, I did this. And typically those kinds of treatment, whenever you're also like thinking within the treatment space, you try to think of like, where is this coming from? Where are they now? And where is it going in terms of the pathological influence? Because you want to, set up a sustainable landscape that someone is not dealing with an injury, that same injury like that they got a year ago, down the road. So that's a big part of the thinking.
Yeah, because one of the things we say is like, the greatest predictor of an injury is a previous injury, so it's just really, addressing that as much as we can.
Completely. Yeah.
And I know that we kind of have touched lightly about some of the things that people might come to an acupuncturist for, or things that acupuncture can help with. I mean, I don't know if you want to list all of them, or if you want to just tell us about like the few that you see the most often, or the few that you feel like these are the ones that like I've seen the best success with.
I'm going to sound so biased because in my mind, acupuncture can help with everything.
World peace.
In so many ways.
Yeah.
Yes. Everybody just got acupuncture.
That's right.
Well, communication would definitely be in a much better place, and we'd be so much more understanding and compassionate towards each other.
Boy, do we need more of that.
So I wish, I mean, who knows with our current leaders, but overall, I mean, I do really believe there's so much acupuncture can help. But I will also preface that by saying I do think there's a lot of complementary medicine to it. And that's what, in many ways, as a profession, we're still, we need to get better on, but really it's like an active working on that. Often patients will come to me as their last resort. They've tried everything else, and it's just like, oh, it would have been really great to see you 3 months ago when this first happened. And we could have worked, like with what your doctor was doing, or we could have, had like concurrently, PT with the acupuncture, or, just so much. There's so much there that acupuncture, while I do really feel is a wonderful standalone medicine, like I can't say enough of how well it works with other therapies together. Fertility, I think, is a great area to really see that, and that's where it's been studied a bit more, where you see those more controlled studies of mainly within oncology, and fertility is where you can get the most research, and you really do see it day in and day out with women's health, and that's where if they're going through an IVF process, the success rates are much, much higher when they're combining it with acupuncture treatment. And part of that, like, it just works with, and I could honestly, I feel like, make an argument, like, yes, it's my wheelhouse, so I know, but I can make an argument for, like, PT and, like, IVF really helping, because you're trying to encourage blood flow. You're trying to, just like circulation overall. You're trying to work with the fluids. You're trying to bring the endorphins on in terms of reducing stress, reducing that cortisol, which is such an inhibitor in many ways. So there's a lot of, therapies that when you combine them together, they work really well. But I know when you were saying about like what can acupuncture treat things, I mean, besides the fact of like
Everything.
saying like where, I mean, it is helpful to kind of put it in the context of systems and saying how, you know, it can treat metabolic disorders or treat endocrine disorders. Obviously, you know, in my practice, it just, however I work and the patients that I've drawn, there's a lot of women's health. So definitely fertility, pregnancy. A lot of people don't think you can treat pregnancy, but it's actually a huge population. I know, I mean, here you guys have like a pelvic floor therapist, which, you know, that's a big part of, you know, that practice. And again, another like complementary therapies.
Sure. I mean, talk about a like, you know, like a high energy environment and situation, right? And like, how do you harness that energy, right, and help redirect all of that stuff too, especially when, you know.
That's such a good point, you know, and it really fundamental to the medicine. And I'm not sure how much listeners, but you know, the Tai Chi symbol, the yin yang symbol, where you have like the white and the black and the two dots, and that such a fundamental part of the medicine, where it's this idea of yin within yang and yang within yin, meaning we have these complementary opposites, you know, dark and light and masculine and feminine, but they're not seen as, you know, these contradictory forces. They are, you can't have one without the other. It's so Star Wars, really. But it's
the dark side.
Yeah, exactly. You need the balance. But I bring it up because there's this level of interdependence and transmutation. So there's always a flow. Even when we were talking before about the chi circadian rhythm, there's this flow within the body, and that's always happening within. So even a thyroid disorder is a really good example of that, where someone may start with like hypothyroidism, but the body will eventually, it's trying, you know, to react in terms of all the signaling that's going on, and it will eventually lead typically to a hypothyroidism. And you'll get that, but it's this idea of transmutation, which is a big part of the medicine, but I actually think it's a big part of the work that you're doing here. And really, when we think about it, we can make the example anywhere within the practice of our life, but it's, you know, this idea maybe from like an emotional spiritual place too, of like if someone's coming to you in pain, and that could be a physical pain, an emotional pain, spiritual pain, like, you know, the energy is there. We're not looking to get rid of it. We're not looking to, I mean, yes, we want to resolve pain, but we're not looking to just be like, just feel better, you know, just stop thinking sad things. Like, it's not, it doesn't work that way. The energy is still there. So how do we work with the energy? Number one, to redirect it, which is a lot of what, you know, some of the acupuncture is doing in terms of flow. But how can we work to support the system where we're shifting things enough that there's a, where the energy can be redirected and almost have like a fresh perspective. And I think even like, you know, the idea of how sadness or how pain or something can be turned into like courage or strength, or, you know, and maybe we could say it's a reframing, and of course that's part of it. But there's something has to happen on the physical level too, where really like the cells, where it gets imprinted in the body and it kind of sticks with the person.
It's like the body keeps a score.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, completely. So that whole idea is like the, you know, the energy will always be there, but it can shift, it can change. I mean, the whole idea of neuroplasticity in the brain, like there's so much that's possible. There's just so much abundance, and it's sometimes it's just opening oneself up to that. Another, well, my mentors and my teacher's teacher, it's a very simple phrasing, but I've always kind of loved it, where he would say that, you know, the first step in healing is awareness, you know. So it's this idea of like, you know, let's be present with this. Let's bring it into some kind of awareness that then the system can dialogue with it. And then that dialogue can happen in so many ways. It can happen in, you know, the physical work. It can happen with, you know, the guidance of the acupuncture and flow there. It can happen with the choices that we're making in our lives. But, you know, let's take that first step, bring in awareness.
Yeah. So I'd like to ask you something, and you, it's a little bit off of what the original question was, but you know, like I heard like some of the other modalities and things that you offer, right? But nowhere in there did I hear anything that sounded like cold treatment or ice, right? In terms of
Figured
like,
you would ask.
so so
Yeah.
I just want to see if you can share with like our listener too, like why you omitted that. It's not because you came here and you know that that was a four-letter word, but or whatever it was. But so I'd like to know from your perspective.
Yeah. Overall, Chinese medicine does take a pretty a stronger stance in terms of cold and ice in general. I guess to take a step back, if we're talking about the overall objective with a lot of the work, it's to promote flow within the body. And yes, we can speak of that energetically in terms of a chi flow, but also just in terms of our physical blood fluids. So whenever we introduce cold, we feel it when we go outside, right? It's like the fingers get cold, the toes get cold. Part of it is because the blood vessels are constricting. So when we start to constrict, we're cutting off flow. When we're looking at an injury, from the Chinese medicine standpoint, that's the last thing we want to do is cut off flow. We want blood to get to the area. We want that local circulation. You want that movement of fluids. Taking the ankle injury, again, a body's natural reaction to, gather a lot of fluid there, create a natural inflammatory response. When we put ice there, does it help the swelling? It does, and that's why a lot of people will go towards that. Now, I will say in my own personal practice, I take a somewhat slightly looser stance in it. If we're going to use ice, it's best used, from my viewpoint, in the first 24, maybe the 48 hours, but really the first 24. And even with that, there's some alternation with the heat.
Yeah.
Because you don't, again, if we're referring to that sustainability aspect, the idea of placing cold onto an area that's going to then constrict things, shut off the healing response, then that, and I know we haven't talked so much about this, but there's various levels of qi within the body that, from the Chinese medical point of view, you're sending the injury deeper into the body versus allowing the body to do what it does, which is just expel out.
Yep.
And if you can get that injury out from the beginning, great. Then it doesn't linger in terms of a lasting injury. If we start to always ice something, the view is that we're sending it in, and then either the integrity is compromised, or that it could just be a weaker point, within the body, and partly because in a way we've trapped the pathogen or the pathogenic influence in that area. But I can see sometimes a case for ice being used, but there's now, luckily, for us, a lot more studies coming out, I think within the physical therapy world, that, maybe ice is overused, or maybe it's not always the right.
That's right.
I mean, the other side of it too is, when we have those injuries, again, in normal response, you'll have white blood cells flood the area, there's just a lot that's coming to the area, so you'll have a lactic acid buildup. Like, you want to be able for the body to clear that stuff away. There's just debris. There's cell debris that again will get trapped in that area.
Yeah, exactly. So so like even like you say, like initially it's like maybe some cold treatment there, and then it's followed up with some heat treatment, and that's just creating a contrast, right? So that creates like more of like a movement of to influence all of those things. So. Absolutely.
And would you say, this might be a bad question, so you can let me know if this is a bad question, but if someone has like a very bad fear of needles, is there anything that you could do for them? Like, has anyone come to you and you've not done needles or anything like that?
100%. It's a great question.
Thanks.
Fantastic one. I mean, partly because, there is definitely a lot of people out there that are just like gung-ho, to try whatever they need to try to help. And will, even if they are scared of needles, they'll still be like, let's try it. But there is a set population that they still need treatment and they will not take any needles. Or they won't take needles in certain regions of the body. That actually happens more often than not. Some people don't love, and maybe it's past traumas, but around the wrist areas, the elbows, sometimes just the whole lower section, the head. There's so many regions that people might want to avoid, and that's totally fine. I mean, there's so many options, but even separate from the needles, if we just can put those aside, for different ways to work with the needles, meaning there's different types that are very, very friendly to those populations. But there's also so many other tools. So I also treat, more of my Manhattan office would treat a big population of pediatrics. So that's, I know, not, well, you've experienced it firsthand.
Yeah.
But not everybody thinks to bring their kids to acupuncture. But so helpful in terms of, what constantly plagues children. So we have digestive issues, we have respiratory, skin issues, all the dermatological. Eczema is a huge one. There's, a lot of attention disorders. There's a lot of anxiety, so that whole pediatric population is an area where it's wonderful to work with kids, but you typically use different tools. Often with them, but I've now brought it to my adult population too, are things like shonation, which are, it's in a sense a little bit how we think of gua sha, where there's different tools that you use with the channels. The flow of the channels and how you're working with each specific points. You can do a lot with external work. Japanese acupuncture, which we haven't really talked that much about, actually has a lot of non-insertion practice to it. So there's that as well. I do work with gemstones a lot, which I know may sound kind of like a little wooey and purple crystals kind of deal.
Crystals and gemstones?
But, I mean, in many ways, like we all come from the same stuff, it's like in terms of the elements of, the skies, the earth, the things. So there's a lot of resonance in terms of how the gemstones kind of vibrate with us or work with us in terms of that. So I am working with the points often with the gemstones, but they could even be used as gua sha tools. So sometimes you'll work with the channels and specific points to influence certain things.
So you're saying it's just kind of more of like a broad coverage in terms of that, or no?
You're still using channel theory.
Yeah.
You're still utilizing the acupuncture points and the flow of the channels. There are certain regions that certain stones will resonate with, so you'll know to work with those regions, and that's more broad. But overall, you're still working within channel theory. The red laser light is another really good way, and that has actually impressed me. Like, we weren't trained that in school. When you go through your master's program, they don't typically train you a lot of, which is very good. In order to keep your license current, there's a level of, CUs that you need to continuously do. So there's a lot of amazing courses out there. So I've done a lot of postgraduate study with red laser, working with laser therapy, and even like the pen lights, which are really very helpful. So those will mimic almost as if you're working with a needle, where you can actually focus on certain points, and you're still stimulating the acupuncture point. So that's another great tool that you can use. I will not also discount, cupping and gua sha is like really helpful tools for that too. So those are also, really, really amazing things that you can use for those kinds of populations.
Got it. And I will say, like, if anyone is nervous or if you're in the Long Island area, Chelsea really did make me feel so comfortable. Like I said, I was so nervous. And Kingsley went first, so he was telling me, like, yeah, I should put one in my head and in my feet. And I'm like, I'm
sure
not
you were
doing
like, oh my
that.
gosh.
Yeah, but she's like, this is, what's the thing? The stopper? Not the stopper. Like the thing that goes before the needle that you feel.
Oh, yes. So the guide tube.
The guide tube.
Yes.
She was like, this is the guide, 3, 2, 1, this is the needle. And then I got a needle in my head and my feet. And I was like, you can put one in my head.
Try one right by your eyeball.
No, so I'm still not ready for that one. But I was like, you can put one in my head.
Not so bad.
So
Thank you,
yeah,
Jordan.
definitely if you're in the area, you should give it a try.
Thank you.
Of course.
Yeah, the communication about it, again, I think is a big part of it. But yeah, letting people know what's coming to them.
Yes.
No, but clearly it's evident that you're a healer, and the way that you approach it makes everyone feel very safe quickly. I think that's a huge huge part of the experience with you. So that's really powerful. I appreciate that.
Thank you. That's so kind. I appreciate that. Again, I feel really lucky to be doing what I do.
Yeah.
And
You're made for it.
so,
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
Of course.
if people are trusting you with their, I mean, again, like they're coming to you like in these spots, right? Where they're like, I need help. And it's a big deal, for someone. Like I wish in all areas, like within Western medicine, like primary care and other, fields, that people could say, I trust my doctor, and they have their best interest. But I think there's so many wonderful doctors, and I think they do really care about their patients. So I feel really lucky to be part of.
Yeah. Is there like a miracle client or scenario that you actually, that you were able to help through your treatment?
And speaking more to a population, I would probably actually reference like the Lyme disease or Lyme infection patients.
Okay.
Because they come to you, again, you're the last resort.
Yeah.
With so many different things going on. Typically a lot of like joint issues, sometimes neurological issues, sometimes phantom pains. There's so many things that pop up with Lyme and their co-infections. That's where I've actually seen some things where I'm just like, whoa, like I wasn't really sure if that would help. So, and I know I didn't talk so much about herbs, we talked about external herbs, but sometimes herbs get brought in as well, and that can be very, very helpful too. But they're internal medicine, and it is just like with medications. I think we tread carefully with that. I mean, to answer your question though, honestly, within a treatment space, even the smallest things sometimes, I'm just like, wow, that's really beautiful that happened. And not to say that, because I wholeheartedly believe in the medicine and its effects, but I will say there are times and I'm just like, I didn't think that would work so quick, or, or just like, because you've been dealing with this for 3 years, and that's really great that your digestion feels like regular bowel movements.
For sure.
There's a lot of small miracles, I would say.
Okay, yeah.
But yeah, the big, I mean, and the other really happy is because of women's health, like when people get pregnant and they've been trying, and that goes for both male and female in terms of the fertility. I work with both. And it's really just a beautiful moment when you get that news.
Absolutely.
And, can then see someone through that.
Yeah, I definitely know some of the beneficiaries of the treatment, so it's really amazing to see, and of course the blessings that the families get from that.
100%.
Yeah, that's great. That's great.
We ask every guest 2 questions. The first question
Heavy
is
questions.
No. The first question is, when do you feel like you're in your element?
Oh man, I mean, we're definitely talking about the medicine. I love it.
I could tell.
And yeah, working with people, and again, hearing those those happy moments too, when they finally have found some relief or have noticed the shift themselves. But yeah, I would say, separate from the acupuncture, in terms of one of my favorite modalities, it's actually a lot of the gua sha work. That is a bit in terms of my element, where partly because it's, and I'll try to keep this quick, but it's very, it's both therapeutically helpful and diagnostically helpful, where I can see some of the shifts in my, so I was like, okay, we have stagnation in this channel, this is going on here, there's some coldness trapped here. But therapeutically, the patient can typically walk away with oh, I feel so much looser here, sort of thing. So I actually really enjoy, I mean, it's a physical, very manual work, but I actually really love it, and get really grounded in that.
Nice.
Yeah.
So our second question is, what, if any, is your perfect song?
Yes, and that's an incredibly hard question, I'm sure, for anyone. But I will say that when I find, where you kind of feel it in yourself, where you're like, oh, I feel like happy and at peace with this, but it's also kind of like tingling my heart, and I feel like I have clarity. I would actually say, well, it's not a perfect song, but within the genre, some like old-timey bluegrass is actually some of it traces back, I think, to my upbringing and my parents' love. I think I was very fortunate to have a very loving, great childhood, and music was a huge part of it, all different styles. But I think, my parents really had a thing for like old-timey bluegrass. So there's something about it. Like if I'm looking to prepare for something that, like, I got through my master's program with a lot of bluegrass because it's really like I just able to study and focus with it. And rock climbing. That was the other thing.
Nice, okay.
Which I don't do as much anymore, but it was very helpful at the time because you really can, meditate and focus in on that stuff. So I would say, gosh, I'm so interested to hear both of yours. It's such a hard question, isn't it? Because there's so many.
Of course, it depends on the context and whatever, so yeah.
So if I had to answer, it would probably be that.
Love that.
Nice. Yeah. Very awesome.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah. So yeah, just want to quickly recap here, in terms of that. Like, so, Chelsea, thank you again. Lines of Life Acupuncture. Can you just like tell our listeners how they can find you?
So probably the easiest way is going to the website, which is Lines of Life Acupuncture.com. I know not everybody can spell acupuncture. I feel like even when I was studying, I was
One
like,
C,
wait,
two
one C,
C's,
two
what do you
C's.
got
It'll
here?
be in the
Yeah.
show notes.
Exactly.
I'll spell it for you.
So we're going to link it to the show notes.
That's probably the easiest. All the contact information is there. And I just also want to say a big thanks because I have my private practice that I've been, have an office in Manhattan and Forest Hills, but I now have like such the great fortune to be working within this space here.
Yeah, we're so happy to have you here.
It's really been a gift in itself too, in so many ways.
Oh,
So,
thank you.
yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes. All right. So, hey, we appreciate your time. We appreciate your attention. So thank you guys, and we will see you soon.
Bye.